Welcome to the American Academy of Grief Counseling's Videogram on What's a Grief Monster. And believe it or not, this is a term used in grief counseling or in any type of bereavement. It seems a little childish and juvenile, but sometimes these terms can also help us as adults understand grief in a better way, or our emotions that are tied with grief. In regards to grief monster in itself, I think it originated some way in how we discuss grief with children, and it's kind of grown on its own as a terminology that can be used in various sessions in counseling itself, and how we deal with our own grief and our own fears. So grief monsters themselves are reminders of loss. We live with them from our whole self, for our whole lives, the moment loss occurs, and the remnants of that loss and how they reemerge in our lives, or the sadness that we experience and how we experience that sadness, is really what a grief monster is. And we all have our own unique grief monsters. What we look at are various feelings or memories of the past, present, and future, and how they tie together when we experience or remember a particular loss. They in themselves are not evil or scary per se, but they are ourselves, our very own memories, and how we deal with them will determine how scary they end up being. They can emerge due to any type of memory, a particular sound, a scent, a scene, or someone that has similarity, or a place that has similarity to what reminds us of this particular loss. So how we cope with those re-emerging feelings will really dictate how much of a monster these emotions can become. But usually, like any monster, they don't come when they're invited. They're usually uninvited, and the feelings themselves are not necessarily welcomed at that moment. So any type of particular function, there's an empty seat of who used to sit there. Maybe you're in a quiet room or a certain place, or a sting from the past reemerges, and the grief monster can awaken and come from underneath your subconscious bed, or come out of your subconscious closet, and really begin to make you again feel that pain that you thought you would never feel again. And when I say sting from the past, that can happen at any time. How many of you have had individuals who passed away, and then you come across an acquaintance that you haven't seen in 5-6 years, and they ask how the particular individual who died 5 years ago is doing? And that's a sting to our own self, and a reminder that who we loved is no longer here. So that's pretty much what we mean by what is a grief monster. A grief monster is our own emotions, our own feelings, re-emerging at certain times, usually when we don't want them to. So when these emotions rise, what do we do? How do we deal with these grief monsters? How do we deal with them when they want to come out and say hello? Well, first and foremost, we know they're not evil in themselves. They're our own feelings. And sometimes if those feelings are emerging, then maybe it's time that we pay attention to those feelings. So we don't want to flee them. Emotions need to be faced. But something that's important to document is that we don't have to necessarily deal with them at that exact moment. If you're at work or doing something, you can say, I'm not going to deal with this right now. When I get home, I'll give myself some quiet time to really think through this process. So that's something important. I think also to reflect on the emotions themselves. Why are certain emotions emerging when you reflect on the past? Why is there guilt, anger, or a deep melancholy? Why are these things existing? And try to understand where these particular emotions are coming. Also, utilize coping strategies that have worked in the past. Some individuals have a hard time coping with emotion. Well, how have you coped in the past since you've endured this loss, and now this emotion is re-emerging? What is your best way to cope? Is it to talk to someone? Is it to meditate? What is it? And then realize that a grief monster can bring a sting or a smile. It can be a thought that makes you very sad, or it could be a memory that makes you smile. So these instances are going to be with us for the rest of our lives because the loss was so profound. The person was so important to our life. So we're going to have reoccurrences where things re-emerge, anniversaries, individuals who make comments about those who have passed away, or any memories that are just triggered by our five senses. And how we deal with that is very important. What's Your Grief has an excellent video, blog, I should say, on grief monsters. They have a couple of them. And I think if you're interested, go to their blog, check out what they have to say about dealing with grief monsters themselves. We are the American Academy of Grief Counseling, and this is our grief counseling certification program. At the very bottom, there is a link that you can click that will give you the full information on our online and independent study program, which leads to a 4-year certification. You can call us at 330-652-7776. Again, that number is 330-652-7776. Or you can also email us at info@aihcp.org. Again, that's info@aihcp.org. So whatever type of grief monster you have under your psychological bed, don't be too afraid. Know that it's your own feelings coming out over someone that meant the world to you that is no longer present. And maybe, just maybe, you need to think about something, and that grief monster is reminding you that you do. I'd like to wish you a good day, and thank you for listening.